All right. So we're here. I'm glad to be here with you guys. Looking forward to this. But today's show, and this might become a bit of a recurring, monthly show of us just kind of chatting through some of the larger theme things that we see happening in the cyber world. So that way, if you're talking to a customer of your MSP and they ask about cyber news, you'll have something relevant in your pocket. And I kind of want to make this in a little bit of a reference and a nod, certainly to James Azar. His show in the mornings is where I get a lot of these stories, and I'm able to kind of start thinking about them and curating what I think means something in our space. And we'll try to reduce a lot of the, kind of other ancillary stuff that doesn't mean as much to the non-enterprise world, right? Like the Palo Alto
Right.
isn't going to make a big difference in your worlds here. So, yeah. So I want to kind of go through a couple of these different articles and talk about some recent events, and then we'll just kind of chat about them if you guys are ready.
Let's do it.
I actually have a little bit of a breaking news fear right now, though, Cromar. I'm told that in the Canadian attack that we're going to talk about, that a reputable source in the intelligence community told me that the Poutine network might actually be down as a result.
The Canadian poutine gravy recipe that was stored in the cloud is no longer accessible, and there's now a Canadian-wide shortage of poutine gravy. So
It's gonna be
hopefully
unfortunate.
for anyone in to our northern brothers listening, I'm hoping that you guys are enjoying some dry French fries today. So
Oh, hoping the dry French fries on them. That's rough.
unfortunate.
That's a
It's
tough
rough.
one.
Yeah.
it,
So
it,
let's
you know
let's
what?
lead off.
I have to
Go
say
ahead.
this though, of all the nations in the world to be cyber attacked, Canada is in my opinion one of the least likely. It's almost like beating up a kitten. You're like, what are you doing over
Yeah. Why did you just punch that
What?
kid?
Yeah.
So yeah, short story. This incident says, "Hey, listen." By CNN, first detected last week that they have disrupted Canadian Foreign Ministry's internet-based services. Canadian cybersecurity officials are working to restore those internet services as of Monday night. Critical services for Canadians through the Foreign Ministry were not affected by the incident. So they basically said, "Hey, we had an incident." They took off. They're not saying much. They typically don't.
Right.
This has come up a couple times from Canada where they've had pretty big cyber incidents and haven't really discussed much. But any thoughts on this, Dom? Like just from a commentary. I mean, we beat up on the poutine aspect, and really, Cromar, 100%. Like Canada, why would you go punch Canada in the face? Like I don't.
Right.
Uh,
Right. I don't know. It'd be like it's almost like punching Switzerland in the face. Like
I have an
what did they
idea
do?
why.
I was going to
Well,
ask. So obviously, whenever there's some kind of incident like this, there's a
Yeah.
gain, right? There's
Yeah.
either a
Right.
monetary gain or a stronghold or
Yep.
something they're looking for. What's the gain here? Like I'm not really.
They
understanding.
did just punch
wager
China in the
intelligence.
face. They did just punch
Well,
China
they
in the
did.
face
They
about
did.
the Olympics and the app. It was a discovery
Right.
out of Canada that said that.
Right.
I don't know. That's certainly making a
You know
corollary where
what?
there might
I
not
know
be.
what it is. It was Canada was unveiling the Olympic hockey team roster today, and this was China's way of
we gotta
taking them
stop 'em.
down. They want to win the gold medal. It's not happening.
Oh, that's funny. Starve them of
I would
their
venture
poutine.
though, like foreign ministry, right? Like I would venture towards intelligence. Honestly, I really would. Like that's our Department of State, right? I'm mostly not familiar with how that works, but I would venture that there's probably some intelligence to be gathered out of that, right? And here's the thing, and we have this conversation a lot when there's an espionage incident, right? And that's what SolarWinds was.
Yeah.
We have the conversation about we are doing the same thing. Canada is doing the same thing, and it's sort of this weird, awkward mutual understanding that we all spy on each other in the world, right? The problem
Always
occurs
have.
when we go a little too far, and obviously something probably went a little too far here. SolarWinds was a little too far because of the amount of vulnerability that came out of the incident. This was probably some sort of overstep, and like you said, they're not saying much, which makes this kind of hard to speculate on. But my guess would be it's an intelligence gain by someone's intelligence agency.
Yep. All right. So let's step into the next one. So this one, we actually have a much more direct potential as to what the corollary is. So the Australian Prime Minister a couple of days ago announced that his WeChat account was hacked and didn't apparently either have 2FA or they surpassed the 2FA aspects of that, or they potentially even had code level access. But ultimately, his account was taken, and it was this really neat thing because they, Kyle, Lyle, back to the Canada piece, back to the Canada piece. The bad actors consider Canada a weak link. Yeah, certainly potential. And we also have a lot of interaction and business dealings between, a lot of interfaces between. So that would make a strong statement, Lyle. You're probably right. But anyway, so the WeChat account is hacked. And there's actually this large protest of saying, we have a huge Chinese population in Australia. They're one of the larger minorities in Australia, and they all use a lot of WeChat. And so that's why during this political race, this is in the middle of a political race against his opponent, who is significantly being beaten up by. And the interesting part about this article is that the Australian government has said, you're interfering in our politics. Like, you are absolutely interfering in our politics by not letting us market to our Chinese population that primarily get their data from WeChat as the governor incumbent. And yet the political adversary has not been impacted. And so the interesting aspect of this to me is really much more on that geopolitical aspect of, trying to really further expand China's Belt and Road Initiative through that expansion and even politics, right? I mean, we've never heard of a nation state being involved in politics. It's a crazy,
no.
But yeah,
no influence happening there. Honestly, my first question is, why does the Australian Prime Minister have his own WeChat account? Like,
that seems like a question.
It's to speak to the constituency. No, it's to speak to the constituency. It is literally
sure.
The populace. Yeah. But why is he hold it?
Not
is
his
point.
account.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah, I'm with you.
This makes me feel like I really hope Joe Biden and or Donald Trump had a WhatsApp account and that they were just chatting with folks left and right. It just feels, I don't know why, it almost feels like one of those.
But it's kind of their Twitter, like in some ways, right? Like that's the point. Right. And I think he was, and they are, right? So I totally get this one, and I totally understand what they're doing from a political sword perspective, right? You're wielding the inability of the incumbent to stop and defend against the Chinese populace that is a voting member of their populace. It's pretty smart. So kind of that point of it's crossing into the physical world. You're starting to see, cyber targets elicit real world delineations and changes in government. So, but it is funny that there's no 2FA. Let's turn on 2FA, boys and girls. Like this is fairly simple. You should at least have a second.
The other question would be is like, I'm pretty sure Meta, I'm going to start calling them Meta like they asked, but I'm pretty sure Meta manages government accounts a little bit differently than they manage, my account or your account, right? Like, I would reckon that there's I would hope, like Google has their whole protected people or whatever they call it program.
Yeah, you've got blue checks in LinkedIn, right? To some extent.
Right. Like, I would really hope that there's some other level of account management to say, wait a minute, like, this is not an action this person should be taking because of their publicity. But who knows? Like, I could be totally wrong on that.
My call to action, turn on 2FA. Protect your social accounts. 2FA. They're part of the attack every time. All right. This one, though, has real-world implications to MSPs. So I want you guys to pay attention. If I lose you anywhere else, please pay attention to this as an MSP. So if you remember, a little while back, there was an act of war clause being enacted by the insurers and reinsurers of Merck. And if I recall correctly, this was related to NotPetya, which was the earlier wiper that did affect and impact Merck. And so they had a cyber event. So short story is Merck won their lawsuit against their cyber firm. And the judge specifically states that the reason they won was that the insurers had every opportunity to update the language in their policy to include cyber in the acts of war. Right. And so being able to say, hey, this was a nation state, which where you get that attribution, as James said when he announced this, like, or I think it was actually Dr. Gerald Auger. But, where do you get the attribution? Like, how do you know it's an act of war? Who gets to decide that? Is that going to happen in our courts now? Are you going to start defining acts of war in court? Anyways, tangential to the point. From an MSP perspective, what this means is your insurance companies are going to turn around and modify their active war clauses on the general liability insurance, probably on cyber insurance to some extent, and they're going to have that as another tool in their arsenal to not pay, on these claims if possible. So
Question
this
there
was
for you, Matt. When you say, I'm reading through these articles, looked up a little bit about this. When you talk about active war, this is me not knowing. Does it have to be someone that is abroad or another continent or another nation attacking another? Or is it an internal act of war? Like, where are those definitions drawn? Like, who comes up with this stuff?
I think it's in LOAC, and maybe Dom can speak more to it, but I think it's defined in laws of armed conflict and really in between nations. Not super great at this, so like don't take me as an expert on it.
There's a couple provisions in LOAC, if I remember correctly, but what's really happened is, I think it was back during Obama's administration, is that it was defined that if a nation state attacks via cyber, it can be considered an act of war, right? That's where the definition act of war first crossed into cyber, away from like dropping a bomb in your backyard, right? Like that's what an act of war was prior to. So now I think these insurers are kind of trying to latch onto that, right? They're trying desperately to latch onto that. And really, I think what it's going to come down to, as far as defining it, you're right, attributing it is very difficult. Especially when you get down to like private civil cases at the Merck level, it's probably different. But if you get down to civil cases,
was it really Russia, or was it some guy in a garage that was funded by FSB that you'll never prove the handshake ever happened? Like that's the point, right? Like the attribution aspect is really hard.
Well, at the federal level, like these things can be found out, right? If it's the federal system, things are different, right? Like there's a whole group of alphabet soup people that work on this stuff, but at the private level, it's not like we can come out and say, like, yeah, we have intelligence that this happened. Like, that's not a thing that will ever happen. And it shouldn't, by the way. Like, I fully, wholeheartedly agree with that. So I don't see how any insurer is going to be like, well, definitely a nation state. Like,
I want to make sure I understood your argument there, right? Like, you're not going to release intelligence classified information about an entity to a private sector insurer so they can win a case against paying an American citizen. Not happening. Like it's not part of like, no, that's not what intelligence does.
Ever. No.
Yeah. You should know that if you've ever submitted something to the FBI, you never get anything back ever.
The catch of that is, so now we're probably leaving it up to like, civil courts and appellate courts to just sort of decide based on, I don't know, like there's no factual data to pull from. So they're just basing it on some trend that they're going to invent. And then what could happen, I hope it doesn't, but I think what could happen is some shitty case law gets invented that accidentally defines whether it's an act of war. Right.
Not the act of war with a capital W. This is act of war with a lowercase w.
Yeah.
Durability, right? Like there's something
semantic definition, right?
But
like
just
that
know
won't make any sense.
As we wrap this one up, go ahead.
I'm just going to say, thinking of some Midwestern county court coming up with what is an act of war is pretty scary, and not something that I think would kind of flow across globally. It's just interesting to think like there's never been a precedent set for this stuff, so now it's kind of just make it up as you go, and like you mentioned, jump on the train and get yourself on board kind of thing if you're an insurance company. So
it's further, but it's also further showing that the insurance companies are rampantly trying to figure out how they're going to stem the loss, how they're going to sell better insurance products, how they're going to better scope the classes of insureds, how they're going to better scope the actuarial delineations. So, just really wanted to point out a $1.4 billion punch on the chin to an insurer is going to change some practices, boys and girls. Right? Like, let's just understand that
well, and
if this doesn't go to Supreme Court and get overturned, this could be a very interesting play out. So we'll keep an eye on this one as it goes, but let's move on. So one more, we talk about vulnerability management. We talk about active vulnerability management. We talk,
trains.
No, we're one before that. We're getting there though, but same concept. But you're talking about these Log4j came out November, December. It's been a minute. I don't even know anymore. Days blur together, but long enough now that you're starting to see that these coordinated attacks in Ukraine that went against government entities, government websites, government was based on Log4j, right? And so you have
Right.
CISA saying, "Hey, listen, there's critical threats following Ukraine attacks." And if you look at those, if you look at Ukraine and kind of bring it back to NotPetya, we've already talked about this before, but these are wipers. Like they're intended to
Right.
just wipe your system. There is no path from perdition. There is no restoration to whole unless you're backing up, right? Unless you have those systems in a backup or EDRs to stop it. Da 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 da. Yeah, I love it, Lyle. Actually, let's push this up here because active war will be the latest buzzword to create policy. Yeah, no doubt. And
Honestly,
in some ways, is actually trying to be decided what that means
Yeah.
in cyber.
And I think
But go
the
ahead.
Fed will get involved. If it goes too far, the Fed's gonna be like, stop this right now.
yeah, yeah.
This is
That's
not-
my
like,
words to choose, not yours.
The country of Russia is not attacking that 7-person accounting firm unless it's part of like a mass CAS cyber incident, right?
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
not happening. It's just not. Like
Yeah.
some Russian dude might be doing it, but not.
Yeah. Like
Yeah.
if you look at what's happening in Ukraine, that would be
Right.
definable as an active
That is
war,
an active
right? Like I
war,
would
for
think
sure.
that if I was
Yeah.
trying to define this, taking out government systems in a coordinated attack using a vulnerability that was directed at taking out the systems, but not only taking out the systems, affecting the will of the people.
Well, and you can
ransoming and
define
putting up
Merck as an active
websites.
war. Like Merck
Yeah.
is a major pharmaceutical
Yeah,
company.
and
Like
it certainly
they-
would have been back in the days of being accidentally exposed to the expansion of NotPetya. It wasn't targeted, but
Right.
the bomb exploded further out. I could make that
Right.
argument. I could see the statement there. Yeah.
maybe. But like a
Because
major.
if I recall
you know,
correctly, NotPetya was this expansion that shouldn't have happened. It was almost like they didn't have good enough control on where they were targeting with that first one. Am I incorrect
Right.
on NotPetya? I think that's what it was.
I think that was the general synopsis of it. It's been a minute, but
Yeah.
yeah, I think you're right. They did not control very well. It was not
Yeah.
well aimed artillery.
Yeah. This is
but
much
this
well.
one-
Yeah, nice.
This
It's not
one
well
was
aimed,
very,
actually.
very well aimed. This was a laser,
Yeah.
right? And it's very obvious what's being done here. And if you read, world news, you know exactly what this is. You don't even have to be a cyber guy. Like okay, like this is phase
There's a
one of
reason you
something.
shell the beach before you
Yes.
come on board, right? This
Yes.
is shelling the beach, if you will, right? Like,
Yeah.
yeah, we don't have to spend too much time on this because we can get into a really long geopolitical conversation around that.
Patch your stuff, man. That's what this one means.
Yeah,
Like,
exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
Isn't that
Cromar,
usually the answer after these things? Like, I've done
Yes.
enough of these with you guys where at the end it's like, and the moral of the story is stay
Patch your
on top
stuff.
of patching.
that at least is a
been it
huge
lately, man.
bell curve reduction, right? Like,
yeah.
yeah. Yeah, no doubt. And that's what I was going to ask. Cromar, did you do your app iOS 15 update that came on your phone yet?
I did, yeah. My phone
Good.
auto updates when I plug in at night. I'm just
See, that's why I love you, buddy.
yeah.
All
I'm
right.
like I said, man. After this weekend with my wife, I might have mentioned it off air, but I went to a restaurant or a brewery, I can't remember earlier, and they had QR codes, and it kind
Right.
of brought back all these memories of last stream and.
Fat guy
Yeah.
in a red coat. putting
Yeah,
his sticks on the
exactly.
table.
And I'm looking around for some bearded guy with a printer in his pocket. So
100%. 100%. So the last story that we've kind of got for today is hackers say they encrypted a Belarusian railway server in protest. Right. So Cromar, what are your thoughts on this one? In fact, you asked the question as soon as you kind of kicked in. So I'll let you take it.
yeah, so the first thing I thought of when I read this was, this is another instance of these hacks interrupting day-to-day life of folks, right? And I think in the past, things like ransomware and encrypted servers have always been kind of like this technical ether that no one really thinks about. That'll never happen to me, but it's, a great example is today, right? Imagine you're a citizen of Belarus, you're going to work, you're taking your kids to school, you're taking your dog to the vet, you're going to the grocery store, you're trying to take public transit, and now you can't. The train systems are corrupted and not able to be used. And it's like, man,
Right.
this is just another example like Colonial Pipeline and a few others where these attacks are affecting the public in a major way. And I mean, let's be real, like what would happen if this happened in New York City or Chicago or a major, North American city that relies on public transportation?
Yep.
We'd be so screwed. The whole city would shut down. And
We
that's
also
millions
don't
of dollars
suffer
of
well as a populace, right? Like, so
yeah.
I'd be stabbing you
very
for a
bad.
chocolate bar in like
Oh.
4 days. Yeah,
You know,
like
if they turned off public transit, I don't know why, but within 30 minutes we'd be looting for some reason. I don't
yeah,
know.
it totally.
Right.
Like there's a
Yeah,
correlation to new
absolutely.
couches equal can't take rail.
Right. Right. Yeah.
The other part of this though is that the reason for it is has an origin in geopolitical events, right? In the sense that they say that they attacked it because Russia was moving troops along that rail transport in their methodology to get equipment and military units into the country. And so
Right.
the protest is now crossing this picket line conversation to, digital sappers, right? I mean, if you're honest,
Yeah.
right? Like, I don't need to
Yeah.
carry explosives. I have them in a keyboard.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And it's
So.
the same war strategy we've seen since World War II. We bombed the shit out of railways, right?
Heck yeah, we did. Yeah.
And we did not want logistics to function for the bad guy, and they didn't want logistics to function for us. Like, that is a classic war strategy. So it's very interesting to see it play out in the cyber realm, and really there's been all kinds of talk about this, and defense agencies reporters talk about all the time of the new war is really probably hybrid, right? It's this combination of traditional warfare and cyber warfare. And I think, hopefully nothing happens. Like, hopefully
why did we take out
some
oil
sort of
refineries, right? Why did we take out oil? Because we knew it was a component of the tank running, right? And as you think about that, that's exactly what you're saying here. Is it's just got its tendrils now into other parts of its operation, and cyber's kind of in everything. I mean,
and I don't have to bomb it. That's the thing. I don't have to risk the pilot flying the airplane over the airspace. It just got to do the right shit on the computer.
It's no longer that last scene of Saving Private Ryan, Tom Hanks blowing the bridge, Matt Damon there. It's no longer that. It's folks at a keyboard sitting back in an office, right? And it's the same outcome. It's just a little different.
Yeah, and the only one more I want to touch on is that there was advice for anyone going to China for the U.S. Olympic team. Were advised to not bring their own devices, not use their own devices. And also one other further point that I kind of want to touch on. This came from Dr. Gerald Alder, his conversations. But, they also said they're allowing Facebook, they're allowing traffic to leave the Great Firewall of China. And everybody's like, yeah, it's, they're doing that because they have to for the No. They're inspecting it.
Right.
Right. They want the credentials. They want the sign-ins. They want the populace. They want the traffic. They want the visited sites. They want the access. They want the data. Like, this is absolutely a great experiment for China. If I was going to say,
it's not even well hidden, right?
No.
Like, it's blatant, and that's really the catch. Is like, most people don't see that, or a lot of people don't see that, and we have to have these conversations about, like, hey, this is what they're doing. Like, like, this is
buy a burner.
Snake oil.
Don't take your laptops. Don't sign into Facebook from said burner. Take a break. It's worth it for the week and a half you're watching the Olympics. Like, absolutely, if you are planning on going to China for the Olympics, it is a wonderful country to see. It is a beautiful thing to go to. Sounds amazing, but don't take devices. Don't take any electronics at all. Buy a phone.
It's not just China either, right? Like, if I was going to travel to a lot, I'm not going to list
of
them all. There's a lot of
countries.
Yeah. Like, I would not take a device. I just wouldn't. I would get the track phone and the drug dealer special, man, the $10 thing at the gas station with the like, I would not take my device.
Do you have an international plan on this drug dealer phone? Just curious.
Does this drug dealer phone play Snake?
Yeah. Oh, that's awesome. Snake. All right, I think we have literally run out of this rope here, boys. So wanted to keep this show really quick and just a little bit of a news blurb, but any closing thoughts as we wrap up?
2FA and patching. That became the theme, right, of this one.
The theme of IT is patch your stuff and use a burner device when going abroad.
Yeah. Or for other nefarious purposes if necessary.
Or for if necessary.
All right. See you guys. Thank you.
Thanks everyone.